Hello, Stephan here with Liquidity, with a video about the difference between Weissbier and Weizenbier. What is the difference and what are they?
Liquidity.
Today's video is a little bit more about German culinary culture and a little bit of history rather than the German language, although I will include some vocabulary, some essential beer vocabulary. So what is the difference between Weissbier and Weizenbier? Spoiler alert, they're basically essentially the same. Technically, they can be different, but usually, especially where I grew up in Bavaria, where you will find most Weissbier or Weizenbier types, it's used synonymously. But what are they? Where does that name come from? What is the difference between those kinds of beers and other kinds of beers? To explain what Weissbier or Weizenbier really is, let's go back in history a little bit and look at the 16th century German beer purity law, or as it is called in German, das Reinheitsgebot, the purity law or purity order. The Reinheitsgebot is no longer enforced, however, a lot of breweries very proudly proclaim that they still follow it. And what does that mean, the purity law, Reinheitsgebot? It basically means that beer is made from only 4 ingredients: water, yeast, malt, and hops. And those 4 ingredients in German would be das Wasser, die Hefe, Malz, der Hopfen. Of those 4 ingredients, water and hops are the most straightforward. Oh, yes, there are quality differences, obviously, when it comes to water and also when it comes to hops, definitely. But the malt and the yeast parts are a little bit more complex, and I'll explain a little bit more, and especially in context with Weissbier and Weizenbier, this needs to be explained in a little bit more detail. So malt, or Malz in German, is made from grains, usually barley. In German, barley is Gerste. However, some beers are also made from wheat, and the German word for wheat is der Weizen. So technically, if a beer is made substantially also from wheat malt, or malt produced from wheat in addition to barley, it can be called Weizenbier. Once the malt is produced from the grains, the next stage would be the brewing stage. And the German word for brewing is brauen. And the place where beer is being brewed, or beer is being manufactured in German, would be die Brauerei, the brewery. Let's talk about yeast a little bit. So the German word for yeast is Hefe, die Hefe. Obviously, yeast exists in nature. There's wild yeast, and then there's cultured yeast. And when it comes to beer brewing, there are 2 specific ones. There is the regular lager yeast, which lager beers are named after, which settle at the bottom, and they're designed to work really well, especially in colder temperatures. The German verb lagern means to store. So lager beer is literally stored beer. And where would you store beer? Especially back in the days before refrigeration, you would store them in a deep cellar where it's relatively cool in comparison to the rest of the temperature. It's a very, very even, cool temperature. Now there's another type of yeast used for beer, and this is a top cropping yeast, or in German we would call it obergärige Hefe. And that is the kind of yeast that will actually float to the top. And this is the kind of yeast that is used in Weizenbier or Weissbier. Now, why are they sometimes called Weissbier? The etymology of the word Weissbier is not clear. The Bavarian Brewer Union says that it probably has to do with the fact that Weissbier or Weizenbier, because of the kind of yeast that it's used, produces much more carbonation, and therefore it has much more foam. It produces a much nicer, bigger, thicker foam head than most beers do, and therefore it is called Weissbier because of the nice top white foam on top of it. So technically, Weissbier doesn't have to be made from wheat, but it usually is, especially in Bavaria. It's kind of understood. So it could be just barley beer made from that top cropping yeast process that produces a lot more foam. But yeah, Weissbier and Weizenbier are kind of synonymous, especially where I grew up in Bavaria. In addition to the traditional Weizenbier and Weissbier, you also will find some either light versions or alcohol-free versions of that type of beer, and also other kinds of beer. So if you see a bottle that says alkoholfrei or leicht, it will tell you that either there is no alcohol in it or it only has about half of the alcohol and also reduced calories. Another thing that you will hear people in Germany tell you is that Weissbier is actually healthy, and there are different types. Some of them have substantial amounts of yeast still in it. Usually yeast is being filtered out by the breweries, but there are some beers that on purpose have a substantial amount of yeast in it, and yeast contains vitamin B, and vitamin B is healthy, so it's something that the body needs. So arguably Weissbier may be healthier, especially if it has a lot of yeast still in it. It is really bad form to drink Weissbier or Weizenbier directly from a bottle. It should always be poured in a nice, tall, slender glass. If you have a Weissbier glass, fine. If not, then use something else that's nice and tall. First, rinse the glass with cold water, then pour it sideways. Don't pour it like from the top, but pour it sideways and slowly, so that you don't have just foam, and so you don't have 90% foam and 10% beer at the bottom. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, consider subscribing. Hit that subscribe button. And I will see you in the next video. Take care. Prost.